You're listening to the Favorite Marriage Podcast, a place where you and your spouse can experience God's favor on your forever. Join us as we explore relevant topics and provide practical tools for your marriage toolbox. Here's this week's episode of The Favorite Marriage. Hey, friends, it's great to have you back for another episode of the Favorite Marriage Podcast. This is your go to podcast that provides tools for your marriage toolbox. We're your hosts, Monty and Jeannine Mora. And this, Jeannine, is our final episode of
Wow.
2024.
Can't believe we're already here.
Yeah,
This year kind of flew by.
it really did.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really did. And so we're going to wrap up the year and put a bow on it with the final episode. We're going to be talking about the idea of transitions. And because we are in the transition period right now, we're
Hmm.
transitioning from the holiday season to the New Year season. And so we want to talk a little bit about the importance of those transitions. But before we do,
Sure.
we'd like to welcome all of our new listeners and our existing listeners. Thank you for sharing, liking, rating, reviewing our podcast. This really does give us an opportunity to allow the podcast to reach many, many more in
Yeah.
the marriage community. So thank you for doing that for us today. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about wrapping up 2024
Hmm.
and beginning a brand new year, and particularly this idea of the word transitions.
Right. Yeah, we went through a lot of transitions this year. I feel like we are just been in this season of transitioning, right? When you have transitions, you taking something from an original form and then you transition it into something different.
Hmm.
I can't help but to think of in my math mind transitions or there's different types of transitions. There's the transitions of rotation, transitions of reflection, transitions of just moving left, right, up or down. And I feel like some of our transitions this year have just been like a simple slide to the left, slide to the right. And then others have been like this total transition of reflection or even a rotation, put us upside down, right? So just thinking
Yeah.
of our transition of having our daughter move across the nation, like a 2 days drive instead of a an hour and 30-minute drive. So that was a huge transition. And then we've had a transition of health, transition of marriage ministry, right? We've had
Hmm.
some new additions to our marriage ministry team this year.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
we've seen some transitions even in them, right? We've seen a lot of really great transitions. And sometimes, like I said, those transitions turn you upside down, but they are all for the good, right? I think
Hmm.
about the scripture God says that he will work everything out for the good of those who love him. And we have seen that happening even
Hmm.
in the tough transitions.
Yeah. And if you think about like the transitions, marriages can be made or broken in those transitions. We call them those in between moments when you're moving
Yeah.
from one phase of marriage into the next phase of marriage. So let's say even like for a newlywed couple who got married brand new this year, and now they've been married for a year or 3 years or 5 years.
Hmm.
I am sure they've experienced a lot of transitions, but sometimes those transitions can really stress out the marriage, or
Yeah.
those transitions can really build and strengthen the marriage relationship. And so it's really how a couple responds in the in-betweens of those
Hmm.
transitions. And you mentioned all the different transitions this year. And if you think about it, what's really got us through these transitions personally is how we responded
Right.
during the in-betweens. And our response was, could be prayer for us. Our response was trusting in each other. Our response was continuing our date nights. I mean, there are many different responses in those transitions. I think that really helped us strengthen our marriage and our relationship. So I think that's huge for a married couple when they find themselves in the transition
Hmm.
to utilize that moment, that pivoting moment, to really strengthen and empower that couple to
Yeah,
to go to that next level.
for sure.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Transitions are necessary.
Yeah. When you're at the beach,
Hmm.
right? And you notice the waves coming in and your feet are on the sand, like your bare feet,
Hmm.
and then the waves come in, and then as it comes in, what do you feel happening under your
Yeah.
feet when the water hits your feet?
There's that movement.
There's the
You're
shifting of the sand. Yeah.
transitioning. Yeah.
And sometimes even when that wave comes in, you have to like restabilize yourself
Mhm.
because sometimes the wave can come in really hard and the sand under your feet kind of shifts and you're like kind of forces you to pivot right a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And that's life, that's marriage. It's
Exactly.
it's the waves come in, the shifting of the sands under your feet, and you got to reposition yourself to prepare for the next wave.
Right. Yeah, the tides change
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Could be calm and just nice, a nice walk on the beach, and then next thing you know it, you're in a tsunami wave.
Yeah.
But God is with us
Yeah, definitely.
in all of them, in all the transitions.
So as we're Janina, as we're wrapping up and our audience is wrapping up the 2024 year, what we want to do is we want to just do a real quick review and a recap of the favorite marriage podcast and what has happened in the podcast in the last year. And
Mhm.
then towards the end of the podcast, I want you to stay with us because we're going to be talking about two important ways a married couple can work and navigate the transitions from their life right now into a brand new year, and these two things are going to be really, really important for you to have in your marriage toolbox. But first, let's talk a little bit about the favorite marriage podcast in 2024. Um, I'm going to throw a question at you. You're probably not prepared to answer, but
I'll do my best.
what's just looking at the podcast and all the different podcasts and episodes that we did, are there any of the podcasts or episodes that really stood out and that were really meaningful for you?
I think back and I feel like a very monumental podcast for this year specifically because we celebrated the Olympics was having an Olympic marriage.
Okay,
I
yeah.
thought that was fun because we're just such a sports minded family. So that was really fun. But I think one that was probably my one of my favorites, because I felt like it gave a lot of hope. It was the one we just recently did when your marriage vows are challenged.
Mm,
So it was a series. So in that series, there's some really good, just transparent, just raw from our hearts um, stories and just experiences that we shared with our audience that we have heard other people comment about how they've been able to either relate
mm.
or they've just really been encouraged by them. So those were some good ones. What about you?
I would have to say I would have to say episode 25, that was our 25th episode,
Oh, right.
and we talked about celebrating milestones, and we'll talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about that in towards the end, but I think that was pretty huge for us,
Mm-hmm.
and then also our one-year anniversary episode in July that we did, but we did a summer episode called
Oh,
Summer
yeah,
Lovin'.
that was fun.
And we had a lot of fun with that episode. We talked a lot about how a couple can like engage in fun summer loving
Yeah.
activities that can really enhance their connection and their intimacy. So I'd have to say those three episodes kind of stand
Yeah.
on the forefront of my
Well, and
mind
that
for
one also challenged us to get out and feel some our summer bucket list is what it was.
yeah,
Yeah, so that really challenged us and pushed us to do some new things.
yeah.
And so yeah, it was a good one. If you haven't heard any of those, if you're like, what are they talking about? We encourage you to go back and maybe listen to a few of those episodes.
Yeah, especially if you're new, new listener to our podcast, go back, take a peek, and you're gonna have a couple weeks off before we produce a podcast. So go and binge on the favorite marriage podcast episodes. It'd be a good time to do that
Yeah.
and catch up. Let's talk a little bit about the podcast in itself. What's neat about what has happened this last year in the favorite marriage podcast is we have traveled the globe.
Hmm.
The podcast now is in 40 states in the US, and we're now in 23 countries around the globe.
Wow.
And just saw that recently Sweden popped up. So we have listeners in Sweden, the UK,
Yeah. We've got to
Costa
go
Rica,
visit some of these places.
yeah, Italy. We got to go visit Italy. We've
Yeah.
always wanted to visit Italy.
Yeah. So if you're hearing us out there and you are in these countries that we're talking about, hey, just message us and let's talk about maybe doing some marriage ministry conferences or retreats or something. I'd
I'm
love.
thinking just vacationing.
Oh, well, we gotta have. We have purpose in our
Yeah, of
vacation.
course, yeah.
We'll rest, we'll play, and then well, we'll work, rest, and play.
Yeah,
We could do all of it.
all of it. Yeah, we can have our cake and eat it
So
at the
message
same time.
us.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. We have been able to impact so many different people all over the world, and we don't even know who's listening.
I
Really,
know,
it's
I wish
just
we could meet
we
all
just
our
get the
listeners.
numbers, we get the analytics, and but yeah,
Yeah.
it is a blessing. Our marriage community, Janine, has grown significantly in 2024. We have increased. We have an increase of 83% more listeners, and check this out: we have increased 173 more followers in 2024.
173%,
Percent.
like, increase, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's a
so
lot. That's a great
83%, an increase in 83% more listeners and 173% more followers in 2024.
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for following.
That's huge. To grow 173%, that's pretty awesome.
Mhm.
And again, it's just to everybody who's sharing, liking, and talking about the podcast. Okay, let's move on. Our top 3 episodes streamed in 2024. Episode number 2, that continues to be the leading episode.
Yeah.
It's called Who's Leading Who? And that's the episode where we talked about the idea, our tagline of keep showing up.
One of our taglines.
One of our taglines,
Yeah.
yeah. And then episode 7 is our second most streamed podcast or episode. Episode 7 was Say These Three Phrases Often.
Mhm.
And then episode 6 was our third most streamed, and that's titled Overcoming Weariness in Marriage. And so we really sense that if you think about like who's leading who,
Yeah.
like God leading the marriage. Episode 7, Say These Three Phrases Often, is the communication piece of phrases that were important for
Mhm.
couples to share. And then I was surprised at overcoming weariness in marriage. I mean, I,
No.
I wonder.
This I don't find that surprising at all. I feel like in a world, especially this year,
Mhm.
when there was another transitioning, there's going to be a transitioning of leadership in our country. There was a lot of there's a lot of stress, a lot of unknowns, a lot of um just those feelings of anxiety amongst people. And it was quite a stressful year, so I can see how that affects
Mm,
marriage. I mean, anything that's happening around us affects what's happening amongst us. So
sure.
I I see that. I mean, not I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What I am surprised about is that some of these episodes, well, actually all of them are some of our first episodes that we've done. We've just done how many? This would be 49?
This is our 49th
49.
episode.
So 49 episodes, the most watched are still the newer ones. That's where I'm a little
Yeah, the first 10.
surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe sometimes our audience needs, like when they're introduced to a new podcast, they'll start with some of the earlier episodes and then they'll move on to the later
Mhm.
episodes. But it won't surprise me as we move into 2025 that we start seeing
Yeah.
more listens and more streams with the later
Yeah.
episodes we did like in the
No,
last
that
few
makes a
months.
lot of sense. You think about like the movies or like series that are on television, Netflix. When you start a series, usually start from the beginning and you work your way. Matter of fact, I just had a conversation with a young lady that started watching. She's been watching on YouTube. She was like, "Well, I'm just on episode. I think it was like
Okay,
3 or
see?
4." So I can understand people having a mindset of that they need to follow us from episode 1. But really, I just wanna encourage you, if you're hearing this episode today, that's kinda why we make those series, because you can actually, like, just jump around
Hmm.
in the podcast library and,
Hmm.
hopefully the titles, they give enough information of what that might talk about, and you might need something just to give you some encouragement for that day. So you most definitely could bounce around in the content we provide. It's not
Yeah.
like this storyline like you have to start from episode 1 and work your way up or you're going to miss
Yeah.
something. We repeat a lot of our experiences in our story as well in the episodes just in case somebody does do that and they
Hmm.
want to start on episode 18.
Yeah. I look at it as a buffet
Mhm.
of information.
Sure.
So some days you might want to eat the salad of the episode. Some days you might want to dive into the meat where we talk
Mhm.
about when your vows are tested,
Yeah.
that's a really meaty stuff there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, go and
What would be the salad?
the salad probably, I don't know,
Summer lovin'?
summer
'Cause
lovin',
we're all eating
healthy
salads.
habits of dating, maybe like healthy habits eating
Yeah,
salad. I don't know, maybe.
I get that.
Yeah. And last thing before we talk about the final two pieces of transitions, the last thing about the episode is our podcast has received only 5-star reviews in 2024.
Well,
And so,
thank y'all.
yeah, that's huge, man. That means a lot to us. And thank you for like really rating and reviewing our
Mhm.
podcast on Apple and Spotify, because really those ratings and those reviews help us reach more into the marriage community. It gets the message out there far and wide. And so
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. If you haven't had a chance to like, review, or rate our podcast, please go and do that. It just takes like 10 seconds to do it. If you can do that, that'd
Well,
be great.
maybe we're like 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. All right.
All right. So, Monty, there was a quote that you shared, and I just feel like it's worth repeating, but I'm gonna read it because I don't wanna mess it up.
Yeah.
So as we are approaching into that transition into the new year, 2025, there's this quote by Vern McClellan. So this quote says, "What the new year brings to you depends a great deal on what you bring to the new year."
Mm,
I thought that was pretty powerful.
yeah.
What are you bringing into the new year? Are you kind of just settling in the past and you're going to just bring any kind of baggage that you've been carrying into the new year? Or are you going to drop it at the door and just,
Mm,
allow the Lord just to give you a fresh start? I love that about our God.
yeah.
His word says his mercies are new every morning.
Hmm.
So when we have a God who does that for us, is his mercies are new, his grace is sufficient, his blood cleanses, and just there's this whole just renewing mindset that we have when we think of our Savior, our Lord, our God, So don't get stuck in the old and in the things that hold you down as you move forward in your
Hmm.
transition. So have that same mindset of just refreshing, renewing, starting over, erase with grace,
Yeah.
just starting each day new.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point you made. Like, you don't want to take into the new year baggage of 2024, because that can hinder the growth in the new year in your marriage. So maybe now's a good time as a married couple to sit down, really talk about some of this stuff that you really want to leave behind, like wash your hands and
Mm,
put it under the blood of the Lord, the blood of Christ, and leave it in 2024 and
yeah,
not let it hinder what you want to do in
yeah,
2025 in the new year. So that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that
yeah.
up.
And Monty, it might not
Um,
even be just 2024. There's marriages that are holding on to hurt, pain, and previous relationships, previous hardships, whatever it is, years. Like
mm,
they've been carrying it. Let this be the year that you say no more. Like
mhm,
I want something new. I want something different for our marriage. I want to see growth. I'm tired of being stagnant. I'm tired of not enjoying life with my spouse, the one that I said I do to and that you said till death do us part. Make those changes.
mhm.
Let this be the year.
Mm, yeah. You're kind of preaching a little bit there. I like that, preaching Janine.
I know, I just feel like
Passionate.
yeah, that's what I'd call it, passion. 'Cause we've been there. We've
Hmm.
allowed that, and we know
Sure.
what a difference it makes when you just let go
Yeah. Yeah.
and let God.
Yeah. That's great. I think a couple things we want to leave our audience with today before we sign off for 2024 is a couple things, a couple thoughts that we want to really highlight for a couple as you're in this season of transition from one year to the next, or it could be financial transition, whatever transition you might find yourself in. The important thing is remember your core values. Okay. Those core values are the things that really drive your marriage, that they're like the boundary lines for what your marriage stands for.
Mhm,
Core values help a marriage say, this is what we do and this is what we don't do. This is what we say,
mhm,
this is what we don't say. So imagine these core values in your marriage are like the banks of a river,
Yeah.
okay? And they keep the marriage, that river flowing in the same direction. So as you're in the in-betweens, you're in the transitions, remember your core values. What could be some core values that married couples base their marriage on? Communication, forgiveness, love.
Yeah.
I mean, the list can go on and on. Your core values can be as long as you want them to be. So remember in the transitions, you got to remember the core values. You got to remember it's the core values that's going to keep your marriage stabilized and healthy during the transitions in life. And so if communication is important to you and that's your core value, when you're in the transition, make sure you're really putting a high priority on that communication piece because that's really what's going to get you through that transition period.
That's
So
good.
core values are very important. So whether you're a newlywed or you've been married for quite a while,
Mhm.
make sure you're always reviewing what your marriage core values are
Mhm.
because those are like the checks and the balances inside of your marriage relationship. Really core values, Janine, really bring the identity to inside of a marriage.
Yeah.
That's what shows what a marriage is all about.
Yep. And you could think of even businesses doing that, like businesses are casting new vision for their businesses. Like
Yeah.
that's so necessary for even like the corporate
Yeah.
world. So if it works for the corporate world, it's definitely worth trying in your own personal life. Those core values are important, and I think also in the corporate world, businesses at the end of the year they celebrate their victories.
Yeah.
We just had a Christmas dinner yesterday, and, our principal was talking about all the victories we've had this year. So, celebrating those victories in your marriage
Hmm.
are so important. They ignite kind of just a flame, or sometimes you forget about the victories, because you're just coming towards the end of the year, you're tired, you just want to,
Hmm.
be done. And some people just want to close the book on 2024. But if you can look back and just even find the smallest victories, even if
Yeah.
they're really small, a victory of just making it through. Like if you are here and you are still taking breath in, and you have overcome a lot in your life, that's a victory.
That's uniquely important to celebrate those victories inside of your
Hmm.
marriage. And so, as you're wrapping up 2024 and you're heading into 2025, be thinking about as a married couple,
Hmm.
what victories do we want to celebrate? And if you need help doing that, go back and listen to episode 25, where we talked about how important it is for a married couple to celebrate the milestones. And we give you some practical tools on really how to celebrate those victories inside
Yeah.
of your marriage. But you think about you and I have a victory
Hmm.
over a situation or a circumstance, think about what that's done for our marriage. It's strengthened us,
Yes.
it's enhanced our connection,
Hmm.
and it really has given us a rallying point of what to be grateful for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really celebrating victories does a lot for the married couple, and it really just deepens that connection between a husband and
Yeah.
a wife. And so,
Yeah. When you look back at those victories, Monty, whether you had a thinking in the athletic mind now, like coaches, when they review with their team, whether they had a winning season or a losing season, it's important to even look at the wins more than the losses. I mean, their losses, well, you can always build off losses, but what are you doing right?
mhm,
And when you focus on what you're doing right and what you could build upon, even if there have been small victories, like we mentioned, or very few victories, build on those victories. Look back. What did we do together?
yeah,
What caused us to raise our hands in victory, and say we are the victors in that situation, or maybe it was just a little golf clap. It was a
yeah,
victory.
yeah,
What was it that helped you be victorious in that
hmm,
situation, and practice those things, do them more.
hmm,
Lean into them.
lean into them. That's a whole nother topic we talked about last week. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, remember this. Remember that every couple's journey is different, and
Mhm.
there's no one size fits all approach when it comes to marriage, right?
Mhm.
So all of our journeys are going to be different. So we want you to be patient with yourselves as
Mhm.
you're in the transition period, as
Yeah.
you're navigating new territories, as you're
So
planning new
important.
goals, and and resolutions for 2025.
Mm.
Remember that with prayer, showing understanding, showing patience, showing a willingness to adapt, you can emerge from every transition and prove that your marriage is resilient, that your marriage is strong, and that
For
your
sure.
marriage is going to make it in 2025. And so, this is how you can take your marriage to the next level.
Most definitely. And everyone, we hope you have an amazing Christmas and a blessed new year, and we will see you on the other side of 2025.
That's right. Yeah. And like always, we pray that you would experience
God's favor.
a year forever. Thanks for listening to The Favorite Marriage, where you and your spouse can experience God's favor on your forever. If you enjoyed this resource, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We'll see you next time on The Favorite Marriage Podcast.